everybody. My name is Karen, and I'm hosting this Brewers Roundtable today. I've invited 5 panelists to speak with me on the subject of the beer industry's straight, white, cisgendered male problem. Recently, with the Black Lives Matter movement and Pride Month, and that has happened, a lot of breweries have been posting on social media hashtag Black Lives Matter and messages of support and inclusivity, which is good to see. However, working in the industry myself, and as the rest of the panelists have as well, I know that that's not always the case, that these statements have truth to them, or that breweries are even aware that they're perhaps being hypocritical. So if you're not aware, the beer industry is very, very white. It's very, very male dominated. It's very cisgendered, and it's also pretty homophobic. So these are the things that the panelists and myself will be addressing today, because I feel that the diverse voices of the industry should be shared, because I don't think even well-intentioned straight, white, cisgendered male brewers are probably not aware of what our experiences are like, because it's likely that you've maybe never worked with anyone who wasn't straight, white, cisgendered, and male as a brewer. So we're going to share experiences with you today, and I'll start by introducing myself. So my name is Karen Cheshire. I've worked in the beer industry for 5 years, 7 if you count my 2 years in brewing school. So I went to Olds College to get my brewmaster diploma, and I've worked at Banff Brewing, Steamworks Brewing Company, Central City Brewing, in the capacities of brewer, as well as in the lab doing QC testing. So I use she, her pronouns as well, just to share that. So now we'll introduce the rest of the panel. So Mickey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mickey Goda, she, her, and I am a gay, Asian, cis female brewer. And I have a master's in food science from UBC, as well as an IBD certificate. And I first entered the brewing industry in 2012 as a QA and QC practicum student at Molson. And since then, I've worked as a distiller at Central City, a lead brewer at Factory, and I'm currently the wood seller at Parallel 49, where I create all the barrel-aged beers.
Nice, the manager at P49 then.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, Kevin, how about you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, my name's Kevin Learning. My pronouns are he, him, or they, their. I am a queer, cisgendered man in Calgary, Alberta, and I have worked in the industry for about 6 years now, maybe a little over 6. I started off at Central City, where I did a lot of roles, including tasting room manager, distiller, quality control. I moved to Factory or Craft Collective after that, where I was the quality manager for a year, or also known as the yeast daddy. After that, I moved to Alberta, and I was a senior brewer, QC person at Toolshed, and then now I'm currently the brewing manager at Old Beautiful in Calgary.
Nice. Okay, Alex, how about you?
My name is Alex Darko. I am a straight cisgendered male. I'm African American, or African Canadian, sorry, from Canada. And I worked in the beer industry for not that long, but I just worked at one brewery, Steamworks, as production and lead hand at the end.
Nice.
Yeah.
For how many years were you at Steamworks?
3 years.
Okay. Nadia, how about you?
Hello, my name is Nadia Shipley. My pronouns are they, them, and it's. I'm genderqueer, pansexual, white, and bi. If you haven't heard those terms before, yeah, that means I'm transgender. I transitioned, and I'm not a man. I'm not a woman. Please do not call me she, her. Please do not call me he, him. I have worked at a couple of breweries and brewery warehouses in production, shipping, receiving, forklift operation, monitoring machines, both full-time and part-time, on and off.
Great. And Jasmine, what about you?
I'm Jasmine Chaos. I'm an Indigenous Two-Spirit, which in layman's terms, I guess, is bisexual. I've been in the liquor industry for 12 years, in brewing for 7.
Wow. Nice. Okay. Well, cheers, everybody, and thank you for participating. Yay.
Cheers.
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 Thank
Okay,
you.
let's do this. Okay, so let's start with what made you decide to enter the industry? What was your first job? How did you get into it? So, Mickey, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so my situation was kind of unique. I was completing my master's in food science, and as part of that program, I was placed into a practicum at Molson, and I became fascinated by the brewing process and decided to continue to pursue my career in the industry, and specifically in brewing. So the initial entry into the industry was really easy because I was placed into this practicum by my school. But it was a challenge to transition from a QA, QC position to brewing and production related positions. Because I think a lot of breweries are comfortable hiring women in the tasting room or in the lab or in marketing or sales or other administrative positions, but it seems to be a different story when it comes to production related positions, whether that's packaging, cellaring, or brewing. And when I would actually interview for these positions, people would tell me that I should probably apply for a lab position instead. So yeah, even though I knew I wanted to brew.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I'm not sure where Kevin has went, but I will watch out for him to rejoin. Alex, do you want to talk about how you got into the industry?
For me, it's pretty simple. I was in school for game design, and then someone that I lived with, he worked at Steamworks and he was leaving. Heard that I needed a job, gave my name to his manager in production. Manager then that day called me. I came in that Friday, interviewed me, showed me around, told me that, yeah, I could start the next week. And then I started Monday and worked for 3 years, but yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Nadia, what about you?
Yeah, so my entry into the industry, well, I'd always enjoyed craft beer. I grew up in Smiths, there are a couple small craft breweries in there, so it was something that interested me. And I was going to school at the time, and it started off as a temporary job. But my entry into that job was ridiculously easy at the time. I was in the closet, so as far as anybody could tell, I was a cis, straight, appearing white dude person from all appearances.
Right, okay.
And I had a relative that worked at this brewery as a electrician and mechanic. So it was that. So he brought me into tour around the place and introduced me to the manager. There wasn't even really an interview, just like, okay, so you're related to this person. When can you start? It was really weird experience for me, actually. I was quite taken aback. So despite following experiences there and the actions of people around me, I knew I couldn't come out there, but my entry into there was ridiculously easy.
Well, that's good, I guess. Jasmine, what about you?
Straight cis white people.
Sorry?
I said that's good for straight cis white people.
Jasmine, how did you get into brewing?
My first job when I was 18 was bartender at a brew pub. I was always interested in the brewing process as well, and I never went home. And so the brewer there introduced me to a startup brewery, and I volunteered as a packaging person.
Great.
Again, never went home. So they eventually offered me a job. But when I asked about being able to one day move into the brew house instead of just being in packaging, I was told that I would never be able to do that, to be realistic, because I'm a small woman and I'll never be a brewer.
Oof. that cuts me deep, but also does not surprise me. Kevin, what about your experience entering the industry?
Well, I have a marine biology degree, so I'm basically extremely unemployable. So I just kind of stumbled into the industry because I took a job in the tasting room at a brewery. Really liked it. Really liked. I mean, I would like to be here for a long time before that, so I kind of worked my way through a number of positions, and then I just kind of stuck it out. It was definitely not like I definitely was not 100% my genuine self when I first started in the industry because I definitely felt a little bit uncomfortable. So I definitely leaned heavily on my like cis and whiteness and definitely hid the queerness a lot. But after a while, it became easier for me to be a little more genuine. And then throughout my career, it's been that ever since.
Well, good. I'm glad that you got to work your way to feeling comfortable. As for myself, when I started to think about entering the industry, I went to New Brew Place to ask for a job, a summer job. And there were 4 straight white cisgendered male employees there, including the owner, who told me immediately that there was no job for me. One of the employees, sort of under the guise of showing me what he was doing, which was cleaning kegs, like lured me into this separate room, was like, look, it's kegs, and then aggressively started to hit on me and asked me personal information. So I kind of sort of weaseled my way out of that and got back into the main part of the brewery, where the head brewer actually explained to me, like showed me his little brew house and the fermenters that they use to fill orders. And he told me that he wasn't brewing that day, but he brewed every week. And he told me what days to come in so that I could shadow with him. And so I shadowed with him for about a month, at which time the owner asked me if I wanted a job, which when I had initially asked was not on the table. But after proving that I did actually want to brew, all of a sudden it was on the table. I didn't accept though, but I did find out from that brewer that he had actually been trained to brew by a female brewer. So I do wonder if that had not been the case, if he would have taken my interest seriously and invited me to job shadow. So, there's a chance that I might not be here if not for his willingness to show me what brewing was about. And then I went to Olds College, got my 2-year brewmaster brewery operations diploma, and I arrived there to find out that our intake class of 30 students was entirely white, which surprised me. I didn't know at that time how white the beer industry was, so that was kind of a realization. Maybe I should have had a realization at the U-Brew place, but anyways, and it was 24 men and 6 women, and the year before my year and after my year were also entirely white and very male dominated. So that's when I realized how homogenous this industry was, and perhaps that it would be a challenge to remain in it and feel, included and comfortable. So that was my really first big clue as to the nature of this industry. So now we'll move on to job hunting and job interview experiences. We've all gone through some of those at this point. So we'll start with Nadia. You alluded to your experience when you entered the industry while you were in the closet, presenting as a straight cisgendered man, white man in particular, who is the core demographic of this industry. So you indicated that it went pretty smoothly for you, but I was wondering about what are your other job hunting and interviewing experiences been like?
So I had first time I had to job hunt again after I was quite abruptly let go from my first brewery job. So after I came out around that time, I identified as a transgender woman and went by she, her pronouns. That was my first time job hunting with the name Nadia on paper, and I noticed I did get some calls back, and often I found if I did not consciously choose to mask my voice to sound more stereotypically feminine, speak in a higher, more melodic, softer kind of tone, people would often ask me after they're looking for Nadia, and I say, yeah, that's me. I'd be like, oh, are you sure? I said Nadia. I'm like, I heard you, that's me. Oh. And then at that point, there would often be a couple awkward questions, and then conversations ended, just goodbye. That's all they wanted to know. No offer for an interview. But yeah, when I did mask my voice, I did sometimes get interviews, and then similarly, I'd see people react with surprise upon seeing me. Just oh, you're here. You're the person here for the job. Oh, you're Nadia. Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, come in, I guess. And then I'd see everybody react discomfortably. If there were multiple people interviewing me, they'd sometimes just be using different pronouns referring to me. One person would say she, so one person would say he, and then they'd both look at each other like, wait, oh. And then, yeah, I'd not get offered a job.
That's not great.
Eventually I did, also wearing a lot of makeup and masking my voice. I managed to get a job ultimately, but there were some more misogynistic behaviors along the way. We can get to those later if you want.
Right, sure. Okay, Jasmine, what about you? How did your job hunting go?
Well, at the time I was living in Fort McMurray, and there was only one brewery, so I had one chance. So of course I show up and immediately make fun of apparently the regional brewer because he was trying to scrape off the snow with a credit card, and I just laughed at him and called him an idiot. And then he went inside and told the head brewer at the time, like, you have to hire this girl, she's insane. So.
That's good. What about any other job interview experiences, or have they been largely positive for you?
I'm not actually sure if people hire me because I'm qualified or because I'm a diversity hire or because they're scared. I honestly don't know. I'm pretty sure one of the managers at a Surrey brewery was mostly scared.
Fair enough. I guess, yeah, it's hard to actually know what decisions are being made in the minds of interviewers. You really can only guess, so I understand. Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning had it pretty easy. Like the first two breweries I worked at, I got in and I moved around quite a bit. And then the second one, I was kind of almost poached to go there. But at the time that I was working at the second brewery, I actually, I used to be like quite involved in the industry and going to events and things like that. And I kind of encountered something that just really didn't sit well with me. And I had also kind of started doing drag around that time. So I became a lot more like vocal about things that I kind of saw as injustices and things like that. So I called out a brewery online, and basically instead of anyone being held accountable, a lot of the like kind of clique of breweries in Vancouver that I'm sure if you are in Vancouver, you know exactly who it is. Basically, I'll just banded together to basically blacklist me. So for a couple months after that, I was in Vancouver looking for a job, and I wouldn't even get called in for interviews for jobs that I was like massively overqualified for, because presumably that. And then I moved to Alberta. And then now it's been relatively easy. I think in Alberta, it's a budding industry, and they see that I have a lot of experience, and so they kind of overlook everything else, which is great.
That's good. Well, and I find also the craft beer industry is so small, and the owners, they're friends, they're buddies. So when you apply to work at another brewery, when you work at the brewery that you're at, they call each other to ask about, you know, what you're like, who you are, if they know that you're planning on leaving or looking to leave. So these decisions are made amongst brewery owners and brewery managers, I find, you can't be anonymous looking for a job within the same city for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Really is.
And like on that note, like in these situations, like I apply at brewery A calls brewery B like, hey, do you know Kevin? And then brewery A is like, oh, or brewery B is like, yeah, Kevin called me a homophobe on Instagram. And immediately they're like, okay, well, we're not going to hire him then. Versus like, oh, why did he say that? maybe we need to like delve deeper into this. Maybe you probably are. Like,
Yeah, I think that's the problem when all of the brewery owners are straight, white, cisgendered men, which
you're all a
pretty
clique.
much, yeah, they're all a clique, they're all friends, they all go to CBC together. So yeah, it really is difficult if you don't fit into their clique. They will just band together, and it's really hard to be a singular voice in this industry, which is kind of why I wanted to have a roundtable. Who's yet to, Mickey, do you want to speak to?
Yeah, so I've actually experienced overt sexism and discrimination at job interviews. There was this time years ago when I applied for a brewer position, and I received an email back saying, we're interested in interviewing you based on your qualifications. So I was like, great. But as soon as I walked into the interview, the head brewer looked at me and he was like, oh, from the name on your resume, I didn't realize you were a female. And he was like, well, we're only actually looking for a male for this position because it's a physical job. And at that point, the interview was pretty much over, and he had no interest in listening to what I had to say because he already made up his mind that he was going to hire a male. Even though in the email, it seemed like he thought I was qualified for the position. So I guess that goes back to my point earlier about breweries being hesitant to hire women in these so-called physical positions. And there have also been other times when I was asked illegal questions at interviews, like, are you married? Are you single? Do you have children? Because you need to have a flexible schedule for this job, and having a family is going to interfere with that. There were also instances where I applied to jobs and never heard back even after having a couple years of experience. Whereas my friend, who's a white male with zero experience, received a response immediately for the same position. And for this example, there's no way for me to really prove that this was discriminatory because, who knows what the brewery was looking for. But it does make you think that maybe having a female or an ethnic sounding name on your resume does put you at a disadvantage. And, studies already show that that's the case. And these are, these kind of biases are so deeply ingrained in people that it's going to take some time to unlearn and relearn. But I would like people to be conscious of that when they review resumes and think like, do I not want to hire this person because they lack the skills based on their experience? Or do I not want to hire this person because I'm assuming what their skill level will be like, or if they'll fit in with the organization or not based on their name?
Absolutely. I think there's a sort of an underlying assumption for physically demanding jobs that they just wouldn't inherently interest women, when the truth is like a desk job inherently doesn't interest me. But it's hard to break that assumption in your interviewer's mind, I think. Mm-hmm. So what about you, Alex? How was your entry to your job interview experience?
Mine was okay. Like, as I said, when I got interviewed, it didn't seem like there was any issues. But I guess, like, I don't know, it's always it's part of my life, I'm usually the 1 out of 10 person in the room is me, the black guy, so I honestly, like, I'm used to it. So being in an all white dominated space is like another day to me. But I don't feel that when they're showing me around or seeing, it wasn't anybody who was judging me like, oh, this is a black guy, or, like, what's he going to be like kind of thing. Or, yeah, nothing at the time for sure. No.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, so let's switch now. Let's talk about racism. Let's talk about anti-Black racism specifically. And we'll get Alex to speak to his experiences being the only Black man in the brewery. Can you speak to that for us, Alex? Sorry?
Like ever?
I'll get to it, yeah. So yeah, usually, and in most spaces, I'm usually the only Black person, being in Canada where there's a lot fewer Black people in general, and being on the West Coast, I feel there's a lot fewer in Vancouver than there is in Alberta. But anyway, back to working at Steamworks. I was in game design, as I'd said, but wasn't finding a job after school. So being in the brewery, I kind of just started to get a knack for it, understanding like how everything was working, asking the right questions, and building my ability in production. But through production, was understanding what brewing was, and I became. I think it was in the second year. I became really tight with some of the new brewers that came in and some of the cellarmen, and they were showing me like how to do things and learning how to clean tanks and yeast off tanks, things like that. And there was a time when an internal application came for the cellar position, and the cellar. I guess the lead cellarman, at the time, I'm pretty sure he's the current one, he suggested that I go and apply. So he was telling me like, yeah, you're going to get it. You've been proving it, blah, blah, blah. I guess all these, what managers tell people. So I applied, and at the time, I think it was 2 or 3 of us who applied, but none of us got the job. In my interview, I was told that they didn't see me, like the longevity in me. This was some of the things they were saying, because I was in game design. They didn't see that I was going to stay there for long, even though I've been there for 2 years and was, moving up. Like I was lead hand at the time, and proving that I really wanted to learn, and always asking the brewers questions. I was sitting in with the pirate brews and things, and but I guess it wasn't enough. But so none of us ended up getting the job. They ended up hiring outside. I guess they wanted a more experienced person. And then the other time, the same job came in for internal. The same group of us applied. And I was told the same thing, that I just wasn't a good fit. They ended up giving it to the gentleman that currently works there now. And he started a lot later than I did. Wasn't experienced. I don't know. It was kind of strange. It was like I felt like they were holding me back for sure. So then it came to the third year. I saw that, maybe cellar position isn't the way to go if I want to advance myself career-wise. So why not become the production manager, or at least as production supervisor, step in that kind of role. And again, I was told that I wasn't good enough, didn't have the manager skills. But this was told by my manager, who I told my fellow employees at the time, and they were all confused. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't get the job. Like, you're more than qualified. Like, you're pretty much doing the job already. So I quit and got a job in the game industry, where I feel like my managers are actually trying to help me advance, But
I think that's really telling, because as a straight white cisgendered woman, I've since graduating, in spite of the pushback before I got my education, the people doubting that I really wanted to be a brewer, as I said, that I was interested. Once I got my diploma, I was offered every single job that I applied to. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the sort of accepted token minority, quote unquote, diversity hire in the beer industry is definitely the straight white cisgendered woman. A lot of breweries, especially big breweries, have at least one of us. And I think breweries who they point to when people talk about inclusivity.
We've got one.
We have a girl, which is it's confusing to me, because I'm a white, straight person. Like, I'm not a minority. You don't get to count me as your diversity hire. Yeah. Having an entirely white brewing team with one female is you're not meeting, I don't know what your quota is, but it's the wrong quota. Change your quota if that's how you feel.
I've actually heard this many times said when my managers at the time were looking at people to hire. I've heard this many times, is you fit the culture. You know what I mean? That's the thing. Yeah, I've heard that many times. that person will fit the culture. And to get to what you were saying, Jasmine, about me being the only Black person in the building, one time there was a gentleman came in for an interview. He was an engineer, very super overqualified to work in production. But this is besides the fact. But as soon as manager was showing him around, some of the guys came up to me and were like, "Oh, there's another Black guy that might be working here," and like I was going to be threatened or something because like it was kind of like being Black was a thing,
Like there can only be one.
like tokenizing it. Yeah, exactly.
It's
Like,
your thing, only your thing.
yeah,
Yeah, like-
I don't know. It's strange. Yeah, but that's like the big thing. It's things like that when you get used to it when you grow up with it. I guess you kind of learn to manage it. Yeah.
But that sucks, and that shouldn't happen.
It shouldn't. No,
that-
that's the
yeah.
problem. We shouldn't have to manage it. Yeah.
Even the belief that you wouldn't want another Black man to work with you
Right? Yeah.
makes no sense.
Yeah.
to
Not
me.
at all.
Yeah. Anyway, so we've talked a bit about racism. We're going to come back to racism later on, but we're going to jump now to homophobia, and we're going to hear from Kevin about his experiences.
Yeah, so I would say there's only been a handful of like very overt and like intense racist or homophobia things that have happened to me. But there's always it's mostly like a very casual and systemic thing that just kind of is annoying. Little things like people expecting me to start their line of beers that are all fruit beers because obviously I would be good at making fruit beers, It's just like little things like this that all just, I mean, I do love fruit beers and I'm great at making them, but
Everyone loves fruit beers.
I know. But yeah, there were some instances with I don't think they were trying to be intentionally homophobic, but brewers just asking like really inappropriate questions because they don't know and maybe they just feel comfortable with me, which is great. But also it's like you could easily have Googled this and it probably would have made me a lot less uncomfortable. So situations like that, or situations where like people just assume that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not the demographic. There was an instance at a brewery where the marketing person wanted to name a beer a certain thing that was like honestly very problematic, and like I said earlier, like I'm pretty like active in terms of that kind of stuff, so like I know a problematic name when I see one and I'm gonna say something, and rather than just like kind of saying, oh, good call and bowing back, he really like dug in on it, and it was kind of this back and forth for a long time, and it was a beer that I was designing and I didn't want my name to be on it in any way, so it really had to get to the point where I had to escalate it up, being like, this is happening and it's like pretty much bordering on like homophobia, transphobia, like this needs to like be shut down. And then like kind of eventually like it was quashed because the minute fly the homophobia flag, people like shut the fuck up real quick. But instead of like apologizing, he really just kind of tried to gaslight me into explaining how I misinterpreted him and how he didn't do anything wrong. Which is pretty common, I think, rather than just apologizing. And then, yeah, he just like was really uncomfortable and like not particularly like nice or friendly to me ever again. So that was uncomfortable, and I left shortly after. And a similar thing happened to me the brewery after that. I was working on a project that I'll talk about later when we're talking about the good stuff. But basically, the owner of the company last minute decided that the label that we had designed, which was very, it showcased a Black trans woman who was very influential in the Pride movement. It featured her and had her story on, which is like a very proud moment for me. He came in last minute and was afraid that I was alienating his clientele by having that kind of person on his can. And it was the same thing. At that point, just straight up, I was like, listen, this is like problematic. I don't know if you're racist, homophobic, transphobic, or just all of the above, but this is like totally not cool. Like you signed off on this at first and now you're coming in with this. And it was the same thing. It was very much like the next day he cornered me in a public space and like told me how me calling him a racist or a homo hurt him, and how what I did was wrong, and very gaslighting. And I'm like, so I like quit shortly after that again. So it's just like things like that. I think if people realize that these don't need to be a me versus you conversation, this can be an education. This can be like you did something, just own it up to it kind of situation?
Absolutely. No brewery owner or head brewer has ever been concerned about alienating non-white people, women, not people who aren't cis heteronormative, ever. That's never happened. But don't dare do anything that might in any way alienate a straight, white, cisgendered man. That's not allowed. Everybody else, if they don't feel included, that's fine. But white dudes better be at the table and the focus of every marketing scheme, or God forbid, there's no, that's really who brewery owners care about, is that people who look like them are drawn to every beer that comes out. And that's so.
It's a really good point though. Like you're saying, in the moment when someone gets called out for something, and like nobody's perfect, like probably all of us on the panel have done something wrong too, like it's so easy to immediately get defensive, but it's way more important to just like take a step back, look at it, and realize that maybe you don't get it, but someone's speaking from personal experience or lived experience, and you maybe just need to like get that and just apologize and learn from it, rather than making it a much bigger deal than it needs to be.
Absolutely. We don't all know the whole story behind every identity, every minority group. But I think it's important to realize that you don't know, and trust that people that represent their own groups are not lying to you. So, you can always say, I didn't realize, I'm sorry, and address it and move forwards. But yeah, I think being defensive is just not constructive. It's not the way to approach it. So I agree with you on that. If that's all you have to say, Kevin, then we'll, okay. We'll move on to our queer women of color on the panel. So Mickey and Jasmine, your identities are quite unique, whilst both being queer women of color. But there's so much more to you than that label in and of itself. So I will let you each speak to your experiences through the intersectional lens of being queer, being women, being BIPOC, or Black, Indigenous, people of color. That's what that means. So Mickey, would you like to start and speak to your experiences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All three factors of being gay, Asian, and female definitely contribute to the obstacles that I face in this industry. And they also contribute to, me not being taken seriously. Because it seems like the more you deviate from the idea of what a brewer looks like, the less credible you are. And the most frustrating thing about being a gay Asian woman in this industry is that a lot of people don't even believe that I can brew, and they just assume that I know nothing about beer. But if you see a bearded white guy who says he's a brewer, no one's going to question him and ask him if he knows how to brew. But I constantly get condescending questions like, are you sure you're a brewer? Do you know how to brew? Or like, how does a person like you get into brewing? And there was this one time when a girl came up to me with a bottle of beer that I developed the recipe for and brewed. And she was like, have you personally tried this beer? And I was like, yeah, I made it. And she just scoffed at me and she was like, sure. And she didn't believe me. And I've developed and brewed many commercial recipes, but people still outright don't believe I can brew, or they question my skills. And in terms of homophobic experiences, there was one instance at a company function where a male coworker was coming on to me. So I told him I'm not interested, I'm gay, I have a girlfriend. And then he said to me, I knew there was something wrong with you, amongst a bunch of other horrible things that I can't even repeat here. And he proceeded to go on a full-on homophobic attack against me. And he even started to get physically aggressive. So that was when the people around me had to intervene and restrain him and kick him out of the brewery. But at the end of the day, he was not terminated, and I still had to work with him. And it's because of situations like this that I hesitate to talk about my sexuality or my personal life at work. And people already don't take me seriously as an Asian female brewer. So it's like, do I want to add the gay factor on top of that? And straight people can talk about their relationships freely without, the fear of getting attacked. And that's not something they have to think about. But that's something that I constantly have to think about, because, if I hear homophobic language being used around me, which I've commonly heard in this industry, I've heard so many people use the homophobic slur F word at breweries. And when I hear that, I know that I'm not in a safe space. And let's talk about race, because this seems to be something that no one wants to talk about. And breweries are comfortable saying, like Happy Women's Day and doing a Women's Day brew, or Happy Pride and doing a Pride brew. But when it comes to race, they're like, okay, let's just post a black square and never talk about this again. And the past couple of weeks and months have been really interesting, because we've been seeing these like all white breweries posting about how inclusive they are, with an all white social media following praising them for their actions. And it's been a lot of white people patting each other on the back without listening to other people's voices. So I want to share my experiences. There's one comment that I get all the time, and that's, your English is so good. They see someone who looks like me and they automatically assume that you're foreign and don't speak English. Another question that I get all the time is, what do your parents think about you being a brewer? Well, because I'm Asian, people think I'm really young, which probably also contributes to people not taking me seriously. But I'm a grown woman in my 30s. But they see an Asian female and assume I have oppressive parents. They think I have a tiger mom or something who wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, but that's not true. And, this isn't a question that they would ask a white girl. And I've also heard people openly express their disgust for immigrants in front of me, and, say things like, they're taking all of our jobs. They don't speak English. They have funny accents. They should go back to where they came from. And then they look at me and they're like, oh, you're safe because you don't have an accent and you speak English. And it's like, I didn't want to be on your racist safe list, but okay. And people think those kind of comments are jokes about people's English abilities or accents don't affect me because I speak English, but it absolutely affects me because it reminds me of the humiliation and the shame that I felt growing up and watching my parents being mocked for their English. And people might think it's just a simple joke, being like, oh, Asians get their, L's and R's mixed up all the time, but it's not funny. And growing up, I've constantly been told to go back to where I came from. And that's really not something that I need to hear at work. And as an Asian woman, and I guess as a queer Asian woman, I don't feel comfortable walking into many of the breweries in BC. Because as soon as I step into some breweries that have zero diversity, everyone in the room all turn their heads and look at me. And especially when I walk into a brewery with my partner, they see two Asian girls and they think we're lost and, probably looking for the bubble tea shop or something. And they're like, can I help you? So just visiting a brewery as a woman of color can be really uncomfortable, let alone working in one. And all the discrimination that I experience and observe, and not seeing myself represented in breweries or in brewery marketing, they all serve as daily reminders that someone like me is not welcome and does not belong in this industry. But I feel a need to set a precedent and pave a path for people like me. And I just keep telling myself that there's purpose in me just being here and being visible, just to normalize someone like me to occupy a space in the craft beer world.
Hearing how much and how many different angles you have to fight prejudice and discrimination from makes me realize how much tougher you are than me. Because I certainly would not, I don't think that I could endure any of the things that you've just talked about, and I wouldn't still be here in this industry if that had been the case for me. So thank you for being here, for putting up with it, because it gives me hope that you're here. I admire you. One day I hope to be as good a brewer as you, Mickey. Okay, we'll move on to Jasmine. Let's hear from you.
Where do I start? Racism, where do I start? So, white passing, Indigenous woman. My mom's Cree, was called down about my race my entire life. Was called slurs that I cannot possibly say on something like this. Always, still today, somebody called me a racial slur. So, hey, fun. Racism, Canada, fun. In the brewing industry, I mean, we all work together, so you've seen me at work.
At one time, yes, we all did, yeah.
I overheard people saying, well, why don't we hire a hot girl next time? Or why don't we hire somebody that we would actually want to beep? Or why another lesbian? Why not another lesbian?
Women aren't hired into the workplace to be hit
Sorry,
on.
I don't want to have sex with you. I'm just here to work. That's literally all. I'm here to make beer. And also with all the drinking jokes about Indigenous people as well, that I always hear those all the time. Why did they hire you? Aren't you just going to drink everything anyway? Oh, you make fire water? Mickey's so much better at speaking. I'm sorry. I'm not eloquent whatsoever. Crushed it.
Thought that was
I don't
well
know.
spoken.
I think there's a lot of value in hearing like your genuine experiences as well. It was amazing to hear Mickey speak, but it's also amazing to hear you speak as well because you don't beat yourself up over that.
I had no media training. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. I'm definitely glad you're here and glad to hear you speak. Although I'm not really glad to hear about what everyone's talking about, to be honest, but these are all things that need to be shared, and that's why we're doing this today. So thank you, everyone. So now we will move a little bit into misogyny. So Mickey and Jasmine have kind of touched on that a little bit. I'll jump in. And Nadia, you can also include your misogynist experiences that you've had, being a femme person in the brewery. But I'll start with saying, really, again, I'll reiterate that as a straight white woman, I am the most desired and sought after diversity hire for breweries that are looking to employ anyone who isn't a straight white cisgendered man. So I've had easy access in terms of getting hired. But once you're hired, then you have to do the job and be in these very male, very white environments. And my whiteness does allow me to fit in better. But my gender definitely doesn't. So I think something that's been very frustrating for me has been asking for what I need in the brewery. So at one brewery that I started at, they had it was sort of a growing brewery. They had just built a brand new locker room on the brewery floor because before the men that worked there just changed in the open. And I think enough visitors, and guests would come through the brewery or investors into the brewery would come in and see a naked man and that they realized that they needed to build a change room. It's not very appropriate. So they built one and they called it the co-ed change room and told me that that's where I could change. But I'm not sure that you can declare a room with lockers for 30 men and 1 woman a co-ed change room, particularly if that woman declines to ever change. If no woman has ever changed in a change room, then it's not co-ed. You can't just call something co-ed. That's not, co-ed change rooms don't exist. I think as a society, we've accepted that various change rooms are needed for various gender identities. But I was a new hire. So it took me about 6 weeks to work up the courage to ask for a locker to be placed in the women's bathroom, which, and I just was afraid of having to fight. So instead of asking my boss or my boss's boss, I went directly to HR because this brewery is big enough to have an HR person. And I knew that they would know that you legally are required to provide separate changing spaces. So I knew that if I emailed them that there was no chance that they could say no. So they did it. They put the locker in the women's bathroom and then I was able to change there instead of going back and forth from locker to change room across the large brewery every day before and after my shift. But the counterpoint of that is that I spent the first 6 weeks on a new job stressing about changing and whether or not I could ask for this, rather than learning a job. Like the first 6 weeks on a job, you really should be focused on understanding the role, learning the skills that you need to learn, and not be thinking about changing. Or even asking for, it took about a year for me to get gloves in my size at the breweries that I've worked at. For a while, Jasmine, because Jasmine and I did work together, I actually stole her gloves that she had left in a locker room when she went to a different brewery, because they were my size, and I took them with me to my new job, and people actually started to call me by Jasmine's name because her name was on them. So I used those because they're the right size. And then finally, after about a year, they ordered gloves in my size. And I noticed recently, actually, that there's now 3 different glove sizes in the brewery. So my request for gloves that fit made everyone realize that humans have different hand sizes. Even if you're all straight, white, cisgendered dudes, you still may have varying hand sizes. So now there's 3 glove sizes in the brewery. Because go figure, not everyone wants to wear oven mitts to work. So yeah, but just having to fight for PPE is not something that an employee should have to worry about. That I just think that should have been a question asked early on. Is there anything, or step stools? There's generally step stools in breweries that I've worked at because just of various ports and manways and tanks of different sizes. But I use them more than the average tall, straight white man brewer. So yeah, maybe if you're hiring, when people are being hired into the brewery, ask people what they need. That's been my biggest misogynistic experience, is sort of the assumption that I will somehow conform to the male body, which is not possible. So yeah. What about you ladies? Any other misogynistic experiences that you can, or things that you hate about being a woman in the brewery kind of thing?
I want my gloves back.
I think I ripped them.
Yeah, well,
Okay, well, this is over. I'm out.
yeah. As you were saying, Karen, well, it could be really difficult to ask for things as a woman because you don't want special treatment because you want to be treated as equal. But yeah, in terms of specific examples, like I think we've all seen some men at breweries that are constantly yelling and shouting and swearing, and that's seen as acceptable. But I've seen instances when a woman confronts someone or brings up a complaint or concern, they're told, hey, you should have a more positive attitude, or you should smile. And I've never heard a male being told to smile. So in a sense, I feel like women are still expected to shut up and smile and not challenge the patriarchy. And I also don't know how many emails I received from like suppliers, people from other breweries, or even coworkers that start off with, "Hi, gents." So, they just assume that anyone who's important enough to be receiving that email is a male. And I've also been asked really condescending questions like, so does a male brewer have to supervise you when you're brewing? It's like, no, I can brew on my own. I don't need supervision. And like similarly to what Jasmine was saying, I've also witnessed male employees rating other female employees' appearances and being like, oh, she's a 7, or, oh, she's a 5, no one's gonna F her. And these are such toxic conversations that we really don't need to be having at work. And, sadly, because of this kind of frat house dude bro environment that's prevalent in this industry, I've seen a lot of women leave. And Karen, as you mentioned at the beginning, these issues are industry-wide, and I've seen that at every brewery I've worked at, and there are bad apples everywhere. And I guess even a so-called good brewery is only one bad hire away from becoming a problematic one. But I think ultimately it's about how the company deals with these issues that matters, because tolerating these kind of behaviors is, essentially promoting it. And let me just address the elephant in the room. I am aware of the, allegations of misconduct against P49 that have been posted online. And the racist sexist, homophobic, and transphobic behaviors that have been highlighted in no way align with my values, and it goes against everything that I've been fighting for throughout my career. And I just want to say that I personally discussed these issues with the owners and have demanded to see specific action and change, so that I can decide on how I would like to personally move forward.
Yeah, fair enough. I have heard about some toxic stories happening at P49, which definitely concern me. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But I've also heard of toxic stories at pretty much every brewery in BC and also Alberta. A couple of us have worked at Alberta breweries as well, myself, Kevin, and Jasmine included. So yeah, I think that the beer industry is really, it's white supremacist, it's patriarchal, it's racist, it's not an inclusive workspace. As much as, and I think that when breweries do try to address this factor, they tend to limit it to tasting rooms. People talk about how can we make our tasting rooms more accessible, more inclusive, which is so telling because there's something wrong with like rich, straight white, cisgender brewery owners being willing to accept money from women, from gender nonconforming people, from people of color, BIPOC, LGBT, everyone, but not remotely concerned with employing anybody that might not look exactly like them. I think that is absolutely a huge problem.
I'd like to make a note on that point too, because recently, I guess like maybe 6 months ago now, I was brought on to host a Women in the Brewing Industry panel, and it was 4 women on the panel, all white women. Not surprising, but and I don't know why I was hosting, but here we are. So I was hosting this panel, and it was like fine. It was kind of whatever. But near the end, there was a Q&A, and one of the women in the audience asked, and she was like a POC woman, was like, this is really great. Like, it's becoming very apparent that like women are a lot more common in the industry now, and that it's really growing. How can you, as women in this industry and leaders, help other minority groups to succeed? And their response was very like, yeah, we need to learn how to market to other races and sexual identities, and we need to like really learn how, like, what kind of stuff they want to see. And I was just like, I'm not on the panel, but I'm going to speak on this. Yikes. So that's like a very common. It's like people don't realize that diversity matters. Like, yeah, you can like have a perfectly non-problematic brand and like have a great space that like no one's going to get like attacked in, but like if people don't feel comfortable, like you guys have mentioned before, like to ask for resources, or if people like don't feel safe in their workplace, or if you know that you're a token employee, then I don't know, there's like, it's definitely not it's not the be all end all. And I think that's a really great takeaway message that I actually didn't think about until you brought that up. So
yeah, if you're asked to be in every photo op of your company because you aren't a straight white cisgendered man, you know that you've been tokenized and that you're largely there for social media efforts, which is really demoralizing to know that your real purpose is to make a brewery look not racist, not sexist, not homophobic, not transphobic.
Okay, but wait, this panel is like very attractive, so that's probably also a thing.
We're all very good looking. I just want to point that out. Like,
It's how we push through. But
also, if I just heard like, if you throw a rainbow on something, you are not homophobic. That's what I've known about breweries. And
yes, that's
a rainbow on it. We good.
every brewery posting black squares on Instagram. Like, that does not make you
Called African American squares now.
Well, like literally one of the breweries that I worked at, their cider was the cider sponsor of Pride, and they talked to me about it, and they're like, we want to make a rainbow can. And I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, you're not donating money to charity. Like, you're not doing anything for the community. Like, yeah, you're giving like cheap cider to Pride, which is already a horrible organization to begin with. But like, that like you shouldn't make a rainbow can. That's not important. And then like that year I was like their like figurehead person, which is like whatever. They paid me quite a bit of money, so it was fine.
Weird.
But like next year I wasn't working there, and they put it in a rainbow can the minute I was gone. And I was like,
Oh my
what the
God.
fuck? You will not listen to anything?
Rainbows do not make you inclusive. Putting rainbows on things does not
Yeah,
make your
no,
place
like-
safe. It does
Right.
not make it welcoming.
Yeah.
It
I mean, it
might
makes
make
you
you feel good about yourself, but yeah.
Like,
If you don't have inclusive washrooms, but you say we accept all genders on your rainbow sticker in your window, that does not mean that you're inclusive to all genders.
Yeah.
It really makes me feel that that marketing is actually targeted to like white people and straight white cis men to feel good about being customers of that brewery.
Exactly.
They're like, well, I might be straight and have no queer relationships or support any queer industries or individuals, but the brewery that I go to has like a rainbow flag. So, you know, I'm an ally. Like I get it. I'm acceptable. So I think it's really to give people a pass and to make people feel good about themselves as opposed to taking any actual actions that might change the industry.
and,
It's
like,
all
don't get
shallow.
the-
It's all shallow what they're doing. The rainbows, the this, the that. They're not actually contributing to any sort of change at all. So
It's
Yeah,
all
and all the pink cans for women's brews.
and sorry, I was trying not to swear.
Yeah.
F that.
yeah.
And Nadia touched on a really great point earlier too, that like a lot of breweries with rainbow stickers on their windows don't have gender neutral bathrooms. And I'm sorry, but you're not, if you don't have gender neutral bathrooms, you're not inclusive, full stop, period, end of discussion. The first brewery I worked at, I had to fight so hard to get the 2 tasting room bathrooms that were identical to be gender neutral because there was literally no reason for them to be different. And I had to fight for like 2 years.
It's a toilet
Let alone a safe
with
change
a door.
space.
Like I just don't understand why
Yeah.
can't anyone just use them? It's a
So that was something that like, change your washrooms.
Yeah, exactly. That's an excellent transition into the next portion. So let's hear from Nadia, who will speak to their gender identity and transphobia and what it's like to be them in the brewing industry.
Yeah. So yeah, of course, the easy one to point out that most breweries have. Not even most of the ones that have the rainbows. I think I've been in like 2 breweries in the Lower Mainland that I remember at the time that actually had gender neutral washrooms, and for the most part, they're like stick figure in pants and stick figure in a dress with a baby change table, and I've not worked at a place that's had like change rooms that aren't meant stick figure in pants, stick figure in dress. There's one with the one washroom like that with both the symbols on the brewery floor that I could use but like would drain into is like right by the production line and all of the beer flows into. I'm not gonna freaking change there. I'm not gonna take my shoes off in like ankle deep beer. And in addition to that, just like those very, very simple just things that people don't even want to think about. People post about us and like post that they include transgender people, even in the same post that they address everyone as ladies and gentlemen. Like there are simple things like that breweries could do. But yeah, in addition to that, working the production floor in the closet, I mentioned before, I knew I could not come out at that first job because I've worked in some of the same places and worked with some of the same people I know, and I've heard people saying just like truly, truly horrible things. One person like trying to casually start a conversation about like Queen, and the next person explodes their singer's F and F word and whatnot. Somebody casually asks, I wonder if the brewery's going to do anything to sponsor Pride this year. What the fuck are you talking about? Those fucking trannies, fucking faggots, all that. I've heard people be like, even say things that they think they're being like inclusive, like, oh yeah, I don't mind transgender people as long as they're not like coming into our washrooms and shit. Sorry, I just swore, but after coming out, I've had like people like react with surprise upon sometimes react upon surprise, learning that I'm trans for whatever reason, or if they talk to somebody else and they'll think they're complimenting me when they say something like, "Oh, I wouldn't have guessed. You look like a real woman," or something. I've heard people casually talk about lady boys versus real women in front of me. I've had I've had people misgender me, call me or like, I mean, I'm always misgendered. At the last job I've worked at too, I've never been referred to like as they, them, or it's in a workplace, and I've not been comfortable ever bringing it up with anybody. Yeah, because it's not something people even want to think about, and it's not something I bring up when people interview me for jobs, because I feel like, yeah, people get worried, and when they realize I'm gender non-conforming, like, oh, they're gonna start a big stink if we people don't use right pronouns. People are scared to admit even when they use wrong pronouns very often. Like, yeah, I've heard people call me he, him, and then like I'll try to say like, no, that's not the right pronouns. I'll be like, no, I use the right pronouns. I said she, or I said they. What? No, they'll just pretend it didn't happen, and it happens all the time. Like people, like, they'll just try to gaslight me into thinking that I didn't hear what they just said. And I think a lot of the time they don't even want to admit to themselves that they did it, but it's really it's mind. Yeah, not to mention as a femme person, is experiencing a lot of similar behaviors that others have brought up before. Like I've had people like stare at my body. I've had people like mansplain things to me that I've trained them to do. Talk for top of me in job interviews. If I present looking more traditionally femme, people will be like, it's a physical job, right? Despite the 5 years of brewery production and warehouse experience I have on my resume. If there's me and one other femme person working in an area, people will walk by and be like, whoa, it's like girl power over here. Like, whoa, the two femme people out of the like 40 employees here.
Yeah, people are still really shocked that femme people can do physical work, which is crazy. It's crazy because if you saw a mom walking down the street carrying a toddler and a baby, you wouldn't question it. But if you replace those with a 25 kilo bag of malt and a 20 kilo box of hops, all of a sudden it's, oh, she can't do that. That's not capable. So they have to be, child shaped for women to be able to lift or carry them. It seems to me, it's the only time that women don't get questioned about what they can carry is if what they're carrying is children.
Yeah.
Nadia, could you speak a little bit to if someone is corrected on gender pronouns, what like the ideal way to respond is?
Just like quick apology and then use the right ones. Yeah. Doesn't need to be made like a huge deal. It happens. People make mistakes. It's when it's like a consistently and repeatedly like shown that somebody's making no conscious effort to use the right pronouns, that I'll get upset. Like, yeah, you can't just like try to pretend, like put on an act that we're going to pretend that this person's gender is valid while you're directly in front of me and be like, oh yeah, they, them, of course, and then go back to using whatever on your way. Then I'll get upset. But if like you just met me, or if you didn't know, if it didn't come up, my pronouns didn't come up, or if you made an honest mistake, just like, oh, sorry, yeah, they. You don't need to like. I've also had people like fall on their knees and like just like make a huge big extreme smoking deal out of it. Like I've heard them, they're so guilty they need to make it like it's like, it just makes me not want to bring it up again when they when they get it wrong the next time, and I think that's what people want some of the time. Like,
yeah, they want you to stop bringing it up, or they want to, keep it quiet and just keep the norm.
Yeah, and they're just trying to minimize your concern and acting like it's not important.
Yeah, it's making the conversation about them, which it's not.
Like it's awful when after you try to like put in the effort and energy to like say, well, explain why it's hurtful and like try to like explain and educate, then they just treat you differently and they walk on eggshells around you, and it's not like a genuine like human relationship anymore. It's just like they are just nervous to interact with you, and then it's like you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, so I honestly just don't bring it up at work now that time, and I don't expect people to use the right pronouns. Last job I worked at, half the staff referred to me as he, half the staff referred to me as she, and neither of them, it's like people didn't even like talk about, do you not talk to each other?
That's so incredibly rude, because as a cisgendered white woman, if people are referring to me, some people are referring to me as she and some people are referring to me as he, everyone would immediately call out the person using the wrong pronoun for me. So people just can't be bothered to use the correct pronouns for you, which is not really acceptable in my mind.
Yeah, people do not want to talk about gender.
I've known you for a long time,
Yeah, Jasper, go ahead.
and I had no issue. You were the baddest bitch.
Totally. Yeah, I don't know what the fear is about admitting that you don't know something or you've never heard something before. Just say.
I'm like, I slip up sometimes, but I skate past that and just, I'm better next time. Awesome.
I say people don't want to talk about gender, but I've also had people like really weirdly fixate on my gender also, and only want to address me like when it's about my gender, or try to connect my gender to
They're
everything. Yeah, they are. Yeah, as I mentioned, I've had people staring at my body before. Same person. I've had like always try to bring like first try to bring up like try to talk about something simple as movies with me, and then like immediately a little bit later was somehow just magically turned into the direction to porn, and I'm like, what? I've had people, and like in the same, I don't know why I said I have people again. The same person, yeah, later tried to bring up a politician he really thought I would really like, because this like 90-year-old cis straight white man tweeted "Trans Lives Matter" once, and of course I know I'm not going to find anything, but I go to the person's webpage just to confirm it with myself, I guess. And of course, there's absolutely nothing in their platform about advancing anything to do with trans or non-binary, gender non-conforming people's equality, except for at the only thing to do with gender is at the very bottom of the page. There's an ad for tranny porn. Yeah, he thought I'd really like that politician. And yeah, I brought it up with him, like, can you not? And then, of course, immediately got like super defensive about it, and so I just decided after that point, okay, no, I don't really want to talk to this person. A little while later, I'm working in like an area where we always work, where we always stack boxes, where people move through a high traffic area. Something hits the back of my head, and look around. There's a huge sheet of cardboard flops on the ground, and up on the ladder's that person, like, oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. And I look at the supervisor. I can confirm the supervisor saw it, brings us all together and says to everybody, I'd just like to remind everybody to stay visible, if something were, because, obviously that box hit Nadia. So I'd like to remind everybody to stay visible. If something were to happen, it might require us to all have to wear safety vests every day at work. I'm like, oh, God forbid we wear safety vests. That's the real thing about it here. We might have to wear safety vests when people are throwing cardboard at each other across from elevated heights at each other's heads. So just like completely erasing what obviously just happened there. And after the incident, the person came up to me and they said, oh, I'm so sorry. Can I buy you lunch? I'm like, no, you can't. I'm just gonna go have lunch on my own, and so I go and try to sit in the corner, and the person sits right behind me and staring at the back of my head, eating their lunch, like directly behind me. After I declined to have lunch with them, and yeah, eventually I sought to bring up like these repeated behaviors with this person with management, and they said they'd only agree to meet with me if I met with them to talk about that person. Then I asked to have a conversation with just the managers first about some things they could do, and I brought an advocate. They were extremely put off. They were not happy. They then immediately took off having a conversation with the other person, and they're extremely hesitant. I brought up other things like constantly playing transphobic songs with, dude looks like a lady, something like, oh, he was a he and now he's a she in another song and whatnot. And they made like a big excuse about how it's impossible to change the system though it's Spotify. I know you can hide songs on Spotify, but like they said, like they'd have to go take out the computer, put in a new system and whatnot, and it'd be a lot of money. They don't want to upset people. The only other option is we can't have music, and everybody would be upset about that. So.
Yeah, I think to sort of the brewery owners and head brewers watching, just to be very clear, when sexual harassment or sexual assault or hate crimes occur in your workplace and you do nothing to penalize the perpetrator and shame your survivor employee, you are perpetrating transphobia, racism, sexism, homophobia. In the beer industry, it's a white supremacist environment, reality check. So if you don't fight against these things, if you don't fight against these instances, you are a white supremacist. You are racist. You are sexist. You are transphobic. You are homophobic. There's no keeping the peace so as to keep not sort of address these issues, then you are part of the problem. Because these are workplaces and these instances are not acceptable. So I think that's really something that needs to be very clear if it's not based on you watching this Roundtable Talk.
Hey, thank you for saying survivor and not victim. That was a solid move.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think there are also many times when they only interview the perpetrator, and of course they'll deny it. And then they close the investigation and say that, nothing happened. So that's definitely not sufficient.
It didn't happen? Didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel they've resolved that issue now that they sat down and talked with me. But that person's now a brewer. And the brewer who is not a straight dude is not working there anymore. I'm not working there anymore. The person who did those things got promoted right up past them. But they feel like they solved it because we sat down and had a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm. Keeping
There's
the peace.
so many things to say about nepotism alone, but I won't.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that with you guys. Love you.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's definitely nepotism, even amongst
Not you, Nadia.
friends.
I got my job to it.
not your nepotism. Different nepotism.
Yeah.
I mean, it was still fucked that I got my. Sorry, it is still messed up that I got my job because of that and only that. But
I'm happy you did though, because I got to
privilege.
meet you, and that was the best day of my life.
Yeah,
Honestly, brewing was meeting all of you. Sorry, Alex, I haven't actually met you yet because COVID, but
Yeah,
you're fucking solid too.
thanks.
Ooh.
Yes.
Hey, friends. Well, I mean, we're not allowed to be in the straight ways this boys club, so we have to make our own club. So
Yeah, basically, eh?
The club is super weird, but I love it.
hey, yeah, it's better than the alternative, to be honest.
Yeah.
This is the club I'd rather be in. Okay, so at this point, I think we've really showcased the discriminatory nature of the industry through all the experiences that we've had at various breweries throughout BC and Alberta. But there is a glimmer of hope. I do think that there are enough head brewers and brewery owners that are aware of the problems of the beer industry and would like to make changes, or who have already taken some steps to try and address these issues. So now I think let's each take a turn to talk about sort of a positive experience that we've had in the industry where we have felt our identity was showcased in a positive way, or celebrated, or where we felt especially welcome or supported in the industry. So Kevin, let's hear about your experience.
Yeah, I want to say, along with your point earlier just now, that I think that everybody wants to be better, and especially now that there's so much pressure on inclusivity and there's so much like people are speaking up and being held accountable, and people are now realizing that they need to do better. And I think this opportunity for all of us here to share our experiences and things that people probably don't know happened, or maybe even were complicit in and didn't realize what they were doing was problematic. I think this is going to make a huge difference. So I'm hoping that people listening to this get a chance to reflect a little bit. In terms of, for myself, I think one of the biggest and most important things is advocacy and like representation. As Mickey was saying earlier, like she's taken it like a big priority to like set a precedent that like I can do this, like I'm in this industry, and I think that's very important. And I do the same thing. When I started, I didn't know any other queer people in the industry, and I didn't for like the longest time, honestly, until I met Mickey. So it was, I think it's important to see other queer people and be represented. And something that I organized last year that was a real high in my career so far was organizing, basically inspired by the Pink Boots Women Days brews. We called it the Queer Lab, and it was a Alberta-wide collaboration where all LGBTQ plus identifying people in the industry were able to come to the brewery with me and collab on this beer. And that's a really iconic. I mean, she's credited with throwing the first brick at Stonewall. She's a Black trans activist.
Can you say her name again? Sorry.
Marsha P. Johnson.
Nice.
And yeah, last year was the 50th year anniversary of Stonewall, which is a really important event in the LGBT rights movement. So being able to like run this collab that's never been done before and showcase this really important historical figure who is a Black trans woman for a company who's never had anybody other than white men on their cans. It was a really powerful to hear people just like, honestly, mostly dude bros in the industry who are drunk being like, I never even heard of Marsha P. Johnson, but I read about her on the can. I looked her up. That's so cool. Like, that was really empowering to me to be like, okay, like this is in the smallest way making a change, but people are seeing representation. People are seeing queer people. The fact that 8 breweries were listed on that can, the 8 breweries had queer people working for them. Like, that's pretty cool. So I think that representation is super important. And yeah, I think that's really good. And I also think that's why it's great that we're all here, because we are representing so many different walks of life, so many gender identities, so many races, so many everything. Like, it's really cool. And I'm hoping that people will get a chance to see this and be like, okay, yeah, like I can work in this industry. It's not just white dudes with beards. Don't mind me, I'm a white dude with a beard. But yeah, I think representation is important. And I think that it's really powerful when you get to like have that moment.
Absolutely. That's amazing. You had a Marsha P. Johnson beer in like Calgary beer industry.
That tool shed. That's amazing.
Yeah, also it's hilarious because the owner was like, it's going to alienate our customers, but it's the highest rated beer on Untappd. So not to flex.
Oh, flex. There's not enough flexing by non-straight white men in this industry. So please do. Okay, Jasmine, positive experiences, celebrating your identity.
Oh, I don't like that part. I like the first part. Best part of my brewing career is meeting all of you, obviously. And for all of you not telling on me when I was asleep in the bathroom, which was most days. I was mostly sleeping. Hey, bosses, how are you? My best moment, the brewery that hired me right after the one owner told me I could never be a brewer because I was a small woman, whatever. We went to a brewing, come on, help me guys, a brewing conference.
Conference, yeah, or beer festival?
There we go, hello. So did that. And he came up and he's like, wow, so you're a waitress at a brew pub now. And I had the regional manager and all of the brewers come up like, what the hell did you just say to her? She's a fantastic brewer. She just made one of the best IPAs. They all stood up for me, and that moment, that's why I continued brewing. It's because they stuck up for me, and I'd never experienced that before. So
that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that.
What's up?
Yeah. Nadia, do you have positive experiences to share?
So, yeah, well, I said they felt that the issue was resolved after that place had sat down and had a conversation with me. And after yeah, that person was working their way up. I did continue some email correspondence with them a while later about things that they could do if they wanted to have me back. In the end, I did not feel safe going back to work there. But after some pushing and listing some things, I said, like, okay, you need to get gender inclusivity training. You need gender inclusive washrooms. You need those things if you're going to try to be an inclusive place. And while I don't work there anymore, they got gender inclusivity training from community for all their staff, and like I'm grateful for that. Even if I can't work there, if I don't feel safe working with that person, and I just don't want to look at the building, if a gender non-conforming person applies there, if a trans person applies there, if a two-spirit person applies there, and they do not have to go through all of the same shit, if they just have to go through less of it as a result of that, I'm super grateful.
Absolutely. You're paving the way,
For
Nadia.
that.
You're making room for not more gender nonconforming people in the industry, and that's why you're so needed here. So please stay with that.
I want to. Somebody give me a job.
I think all breweries and all industries in general should be taking this inclusivity training, because like I'm sure most of you can agree with this, but like the minute someone feels comfortable around you, they feel like they can just ask you questions like, what does this mean? Or like just like relatively invasive questions, or things that you could just Google, or like would be covered in this sensitivity training. So
Yeah, for sure.
it would put all of us out of a really uncomfortable spot if everyone just did that, and it costs like $100, not even, like it's cheap.
Spare your employees from having to be educators in their workplace, because that's not what we're here for. We're not here
It's
to.
exhausting to educate people all the time, and we all educate people every day.
Every day.
It is exhausting.
Yes, this information is
Breaks
super
your
accessible.
soul to constantly deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Google it. It's not hard.
It goes like
Alex,
that. I don't like Google it.
Alex, positive experiences.
Positive experiences, like as myself, or what was the full question again? Sorry. As my identity.
Ideally positive experiences that celebrate your identity. So have you had any experiences that celebrated your blackness? But if not, experiences where you felt included, celebrated, happy.
I was gonna say, I guess a positive experience that celebrated my blackness would be that it didn't really seem to be a thing, like in production, especially with production and like the cellarmen and the brewers, it was never a thing like, oh, he's a black. I didn't feel like that's how they saw me as
with
a black guy.
with your peers.
Yes, yeah, but
Okay.
yeah. I was gonna say, with management, I guess it must have been a little different. People make assumptions based on the way you look, kind of thing. Yeah, I guess you could. I don't know. For me, it was kind of like a little bit of proof in the pudding, like, seeing the people that came before, or people that came after me, get ahead of me, whereas I was far ahead of them, but it was never a moment where I felt like excluded because I was black.
That's good. Just except from promotions.
Yes.
Except from working your way up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really mattered.
It's so frustrating too, because I've worked with enough straight white cisgendered men who didn't graduate high school, who've worked their way up in the industry, that anytime I hear that someone isn't qualified or doesn't have the background, it fills me with rage, because
Are they single?
okay, Mickey, what about you? Positive experiences?
I've been involved in a couple of women's day brews, and I think that's a great way to feature and empower the women working in the industry. But I would like to see more women of color involved in these women's day brews. And, just like everyone said, I do believe that, being open and inclusive is something that breweries are looking to achieve now. No one wants to be called a racist or a sexist or anything else. So, breweries just need to realize that they have to put in the effort and the time to achieve diversity, inclusion, and equity. And you can't just post a black square or donate to an organization once, or, just hire, one token minority. And I think as long as we need to have this conversation, the problem is not over. And honestly, it's not going to be over in our lifetime. But with all that being said, I truly am appreciative and grateful for all the people in the industry who gave me a chance and didn't just assume that I would be inferior to my straight white male counterparts.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with you about the women's brews, that they can be pretty fun. It's really the only time when a brewery actually feels like a feminine female environment is when you bring in women to brew for one day a year in the select breweries that participate. It is really nice to have some feminine energy, but you're right, they are super white. It's still not inclusive. It's inclusive to me, basically. They've taken step one. Of the 6 of us, they've just chosen me as the acceptable person to really highlight and embrace, as this industry has done. And I'm just saying to all of you brewery owners and head brewers, you don't get to feel good about hiring me or elevating me as a straight white cisgendered woman. So please look beyond me for your next quote unquote diversity hire. And that being said, hiring someone is just the first step. You must also ensure that they feel included and that you work to build them up in the industry. So yeah, but yeah, women's brews are fun. I'll say that. Okay, so we've all had some positive experiences. There is hope for the future, but there's obviously many actions that can be taken. So let's finish off this roundtable by, we can each include an action item or a step that a brewery can take to become better, to be more inclusive, to embrace people of different identities in your space, not just your tasting rooms or in your sales rep or in your servers and bartenders, but behind the scenes, making beer, working production, cellar brewing. So what are the steps that people can take? Jasmine, what do you have for us?
Oh, this is going to be fun. I would start with, I can do just as good of a job as any other human in the entire goddamn world. B, don't be shitty. C, don't wear a fucking mask, guys. Like, gross. Like, just don't be a dick.
Don't be a
That's
dick.
all. Don't be a dick.
Don't
That's
be a
all.
dick. Yeah, that really sums it up. Yeah, don't be a dick. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely step one. Don't be a dick. Nadia, what would you like breweries to see change in the beer industry?
Normalize non-binary genders. Normalize non-binary language. Don't address all of your followers as ladies and gentlemen. Don't have all of your staff greet all of your serving staff greet everyone with sir, madam, gentleman, lady. Have gender inclusive washrooms. Normalize the truth that not everybody is a cis man or a cis woman. Not everybody is a man or a woman. And remember, one of the first people to put hops in beer was woman. Hildegard.
Yeah.
I chose my middle name after her. Not for that even. I didn't know that when I chose it. I liked her as a composer. Random fact about me. Nadia Hildegard Shibley.
Oh, nice. Nice. Love it. Okay, Mickey, what about you?
I think representation of diversity in beer marketing and social media is something that I want to see more of. And a lot of breweries only post white people on their social media, and they wonder why diverse people aren't visiting their breweries or buying their beers or, applying to their jobs. And, they say we welcome everyone, but it's just that these diverse people don't come because they're not into craft beer. But that's not true. And I feel like more breweries are making the effort to hire more women or feature women, but they're almost always white women. So I would like to see more racial representation to, better reflect the population we live in. And I think if breweries can normalize like underrepresented groups to be an integral part of their organization and an integral part of their beer making process, I think the public response will follow. So yeah, I hope to see more representation of diversity and commitment to diversity, whether that's breweries showcasing their own diverse staff or being involved in, diverse events, partnering with other businesses or charities, or even just having like diverse bands playing at your venue. But yeah, representation matters.
Absolutely. Those are great ways to bring people in. Alex, what do you have for us?
I'm just trying to think because Mickey kind of, sorry, no, Mickey kind of like said it already. Like just more diversity in advertisement for sure. That would draw in more diverse people for sure. That's like a big thing. It's like if you don't see, a black man brewing beer, you're not going to think black people brew beer. And another thing also is to build up people, diverse people that are, working their way up and proving that they're capable and they're worth, like building those people up and not trying to just fit a mold and with the safety in your mind, oh, I've seen this guy who looks like this. He's a good brewer. Therefore, there's no way you could be a good brewer because you don't fit this mold. Yeah, I feel people need to start seeing people for the what they put forward, not for what they look like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, I long time ago, before I entered the beer industry, before I was even thinking about the beer industry, but I was drinking beer. I was at a bus stop, and the ad at the bus stop, it was from a macro brewery. I don't remember which one, but it said, "We'd like to raise a glass to the women who love the men who drink our beer." And I remember being so upset that they would cheers women who don't drink beer before they would cheers women that do drink their beer.
Specifically the straight ones.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
My husband did cheers.
There's so many things wrong with that ad, but yeah, it like hurt me. It's like, so you don't want me, so you'd rather me date someone that drinks your beer than buy it myself. Yeah, I just remembered that now. There were really a lot of clues before entering the industry that it wasn't open to women, but here we are now. So, yeah, I think what I would like to add to that is that when you picture a brewer, you picture straight, white, cisgendered, slightly taller, bigger than average, bearded dude with a hop tattoo, then you don't think that any of the people on this panel can brew. And that's really the problem. So you need to change your reference for what a brewer is.
Okay, I have a hop tattoo and a beard. I feel really attacked right now.
Oh, yeah, you should. We are attacking 100%.
No, we want you here, Kev. We need you. Please, we need you.
I miss you so much.
I have my advice
Why did
too.
you do
Can I
Alberta?
give my advice? I think it's really cute and sexy.
Yeah, I would love to hear.
Okay, step one, hire fucking minorities. Think critically when you're hiring and think of why you don't want to hire a certain person. If you think that a woman isn't going to be able to physically handle carrying a fucking malt bag, which plot twist is not that heavy, or that you think that a trans or queer person is not going to fit the work culture, why are they not going to fit the work culture?
Exactly.
So you need to change that in order to make it more natural and easy, and it's going to be like completely normal to be hiring all sorts of people. Once those things change, you alter your assumptions. And two, just like learning to learn and grow. I mentioned a lot of times when I had to call out those situations of homophobia or transphobia or racism, and people just get defensive and relationships are ruined, and it gets to the point where you're just so uncomfortable that I have to leave. Just learn to gracefully apologize and grow from it, learn from it, do better. That's all it has to be. Nothing else has to change. You fix the behavior, it's good. So I think if management can learn to do that, and also make it a safe place for people in situations like Nadia was saying earlier, where they are coming forward and explaining the situation. There needs to be accountability. Like same with Mickey's story about the person who was harassing her. Like there needs to be accountability. So it's never going to be a safe space if there's not accountability. So yeah, I guess that's 3 things. But yeah, that's my.
Nice. Love that. Love that. Yeah, because the reality is the work culture of the craft beer industry is white supremacist, patriarchal, cis heteronormative. So if when you're hiring, you're concerned about a person not fitting with the work culture, you're basically concerned about maintaining white supremacy. So just like swallow that pill and realize that that's exactly what you need to not be supporting. So if that's what your culture is, then you need to change your culture and you need to bring people in who don't fit that culture and who will help you to change it. So lift them up, support them. I think that's really the message. Is there anything else anyone wants to add?
That's the T.
Yes, my pronouns are she, her, and princess.
Yeah, nice. Love that. Okay, well, I guess that concludes our roundtable today. I want to thank the panelists, Alex, Nadia, Mickey, Kevin, Jasmine. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. It takes strength and it takes vulnerability to do what we've done today, especially in an environment that really innately doesn't embrace us or want us in the way that they occasionally post like they do on social media. So cheers to you all. Thank you so much for doing this. And viewers, please listen to what we've said and make the changes that you know you need to make. So cheers.
Thank you guys. Cheers.
Cheers.